Today on What It's Like, we got this gorgeous 1967 Corvette Stingray C2. This was the last year for the C2. They went to a totally different body style in 1968. This body style is pretty much the same from 1963 to 1967, minus the whole split window thing. This one doesn't have a split window. They only did that in 1963. So today we're going to give you an in-depth tour. We're going to go over all of the features, different gauges, and everything that you need to know if you're ever going to look into buying one of these. And yeah, so here we go. Before we get started on this awesome 67 Corvette review, huge thanks to Street Machinery, Hot Rods, and Classic Cars in Elucid, Ohio for making this possible. They do hot rods and classics. They specialize in late 50s, early 60s Chevys, but they also have some really cool cars outside those parameters. To check out their inventory, I'll post a link in the description below. Okay, so a bit of an overview. We're going to talk about the 1963 through 1967 Corvette C2. So we're not going to go back and talk about the C1 in this video because it's a totally different car. And we will talk about that car when we do one for the channel. This one is all about the C2. Okay, we have to start this story by talking about two people. First, we're going to talk about Bill Mitchell, the guy in the picture here. Bill Mitchell became head of GM Design in 1958 when Harley Earl retired because he was forced to retire because GM made it a rule that you couldn't work there past the age of 65. Here is a partial list of all the cars that Bill Mitchell was involved in. He spent his entire 42-year career at GM, which is really rare for a designer. Mitchell is responsible for the influencing of design over 72.5 million automobiles sold by GM. This era is often referred to as the Mitchell era. It's also very important to note it wasn't just Bill Mitchell that was involved in the styling of the Corvette. GM had a whole styling department, and Bill was in charge of the styling department. There was many people, many stylists under him, like Peter Brock, and I'm sorry if I get his name wrong, Larry Shindoa, who shaped the Corvette into the car that became the Corvette Stingray. Okay, the next guy we have to talk about is this dude here, Zora Arcus-Duntov. What an awesome name. We're going to refer to him as Zora because Duntov comes up later on, and not to confuse anybody, we're just going to use his first name. We're on a first name basis with Zora. He is often referred to as the father of the Corvette, even though he didn't design the Corvette, Harley Earl did. He was a professional racing driver who raced 24 hours of Le Mans 4 times, and in 1954, he took a class win. He worked for Ardun and Allard, and then he joined GM in 1953 after seeing the Motorama Corvette on display in New York City and was just in complete awe over the car until he saw what was underneath it. The reason the Corvette got a V8 in 1955 was mostly because of Zora. He also developed a Duntov. That's why we're using his first name, because things would get really confusing if we didn't. He developed a Duntov high-lift cam, which helped bring fuel injection to the Corvette. He also proposed the idea that the Corvette should be a mid-engine kind of car, but his mid-engine dreams would never become a reality until GM finally approved the decision in 2019 with the new C8 Corvette. So getting back to the C2 production car can be traced back to two separate GM projects, the Q Corvette, which you're seeing the underpinnings of here in this picture, and Bill Mitchell's Stingray. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the Q Corvette. The Q Corvette was designed in 1957. In that same year, designers set out to make a completely new small car concept, which would become the Corvair. Corvette designers saw the transaxle and independent rear suspension could be used to develop a totally new and revolutionary Corvette. In 1958, there was a recession in the auto industry, so GM pulled the plug on the expensive Q Corvette project. The Q Corvette never saw production. It was an on-paper, and they did make a clay model, as you can see in the picture here, but it never saw production. The clay model was as far as they got. So my question is if the 1958 recession never happened, would the Corvette Stingray have come out sooner? Okay, let's talk for a minute about Bill Mitchell's Stingray. Made its debut as the Corvette SS at the New York Auto Show in December of 1956 as a 1957 Corvette Super Sport. It was a show car based on a production Corvette with the latest engine and some features of the SR and the SR1 racing cars. The official name of the project was XP64, which became the Corvette SS, and was the first time Corvette used an SS badge. The Corvette SS was Chevy's first purpose-built race car. 2 cars were built, the development car, which was called the Mule, and a full-spec car, the Corvette SS. 3 additional Corvette SS chassis were built. Honestly, could do a whole episode on the Corvette SS, but Mitchell bought the development Mule just for $1 and used it as the base of his Stingray racer. In 1959, Shadona, with the direction from Bill Mitchell himself, reshaped the car. You can definitely see the resemblance of what would become the 1963 C2 Corvette Stingray. I'm just going to jump right in here real quick and say one thing. There's a bunch of experimental cars whenever I was doing this review that we're not going to cover all of them. So don't get mad if I didn't cover a certain car or concept car. There's a ton of them. It's very important to note that at this time, GM, the management at GM didn't want any type of race car. They didn't want to be associated with race or any of that stuff. So without Bill Mitchell's Corvette, the C2 Stingray probably would not have existed. Bill Mitchell was the driving force behind the C2 Corvette Stingray. As mentioned in a previous slide, he bought the Mule car and then made it into a race car. He raced it independently, and the public started to take notice of this car, and so did GM management, and then they actually did produce the car. When designing the 63 Corvette Stingray, one of the biggest considerations included improved passenger accommodations, increased luggage space, better ride and handling over the previous Corvettes is the target that they were going for. Our boy Zora Arcus-Duntov created a Duntov independent rear suspension. Was simple but totally effective. It used a frame-mounted differential with a U-joint half shaft tied together by a transversal leaf spring, a design that was featured in the CERV1, which was another concept car. These half shafts functioned like upper control arms. Rubber cushion struts carried the differential, which reduced ride harshness, improving tire adhesion, especially on rough roads, while the rear suspension of the then new Corvette was a radical change for the day. Okay, let's talk about the engines for the 1967 model year, because that's the Corvette that we're reviewing today. Various different engines you could get throughout the duration between 1963 and 1967. We're just going to focus on the ones from 1967. Base engine in 1967 was the 327. It produced 300 horsepower. That was the base engine. If that wasn't powerful enough for you, you could get a more hopped up version of the same block, 327, 350 horsepower. It's also important to note the 427 came in 4 different horsepower options, all the way up to 435 horsepower out of a tri-power or 3 carburetor setup. Corvette enthusiasts believe that number to be much higher, like 540 horsepower to 580 horsepower, somewhere in there. That engine was called the L88, and they only made 20 of them. So before we get into all the buttons, switches, and knobs, a little bit about this car. This is an original, unrestored 1967 Sunfire Yellow with black stinger, 427, 390 horsepower, 4-speed survivor car. Unrestored. They are only original once. A little history about this car. This car was purchased new in San Bernardino, California, was driven to Michigan in 1974, put around 300 miles on the clock between 1974 and 1989. It was stored inside a trailer where it sat for 23 years. The car was rediscovered in 2012 by the current owner while at a garage sale. Oh yeah, and this one's for sale. Let's talk options. K19. This one had California emissions, but they've been taken off. They come with the car if you're interested in putting it back to stock. L36. 427, 300 horsepower, V8. Passenger head was replaced, but current head is included in the sale. This one has the M21, the close ratio 4-speed, 681, 370 rear end with posi traction, A01, tilted glass, U15, warning speedo. This car also has a functioning AM/FM radio, functioning clock, and seat belts. Another fun fact is in 2013, the car was reviewed by none other than Peter Brock. He was one of the stylists who worked under Bill Mitchell to design the Corvette. He reviewed and signed the car. His signature is in the inside of the glove box. So yeah, we're going to get on to the review. If you're interested in talking to the guys, I'll put the link in the description below if you want to go out and review the car for yourself. It's a beautiful, clean example of a totally original car. So let's talk about the rear back here. There is no trunk in this car. So there's nowhere for you to store anything back in here. I love the way the spine comes down here. It goes from the roof, almost like Bugatti Atlantic or Type 57. See how that is? Obviously not as dramatic as the Bugatti, but love how it comes down here. And the lines on this car are just absolutely stunning. If you've never seen one in person, it's gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful cars of the 60s, I would venture to say. So check this out. So this is where your reverse lights are, right here in the center. This one doesn't have the side pipe exhaust. The exhaust is coming out the back here, which I thought all of them had the side pipe exhaust, but evidently, you see, you learn something new every day. And here's your brake lights. Your gas filler cap is right underneath here. So that's where you put your gas. So that's pretty cool. Gas tank takes up all this space back here, so you don't have a trunk, but you do have some storage space inside here where this window is. So just take a look at that. Look at that line, how it goes back. Check out these lines on the side here, how they come up almost like fins. Back in the day, this was the car for stars, rock stars, astronauts. Let's talk about the body differences that make the 1967 model unique. You have 5 air vents on the fender as opposed to 3 larger ones. All the scripts were removed, so if you don't know what it is, it's kind of like the Packard Twin 6. You either know what it is or you don't. I will add that there is a Corvette badge on the rear that says Corvette Stingray. There's the flags in the front, and there's also the 427 badge, but nowhere else does it say that on the exterior of the body. So opening up this hood, we just pick it up here. We've already unlatched it. There's a catch on this strut. This is where it would catch. And then if you wanted to put the hood back down, you just push it all the way forward. The catch releases, and you will just close it nicely. But we're going to talk about this engine here for a second. Show you how that works. All right, so underneath this hood is a 427. This one makes 390 horsepower. So if you ever wondered if the hood scoop on a Corvette is functional, here it is right here. It's totally functional. I think it's also cool that whenever you put this hood down, this part here covers up this part here. Show you. So you never even see that. So some other things worth mentioning. Notice these windshield wipers, they're not tucked all the way down. They're actually really big. Big windshield wipers. And they go opposing sides versus the same side. You only get one mirror on this car. I'm sure putting another mirror on the other side was an option, but just look at how this door opens. Okay, so getting into the Corvette, it's pretty standard. You just push the button here. It's got keys. You could lock it on the driver's side. Just push the button and the door opens. I love the way these doors are. They're very Ford GT-esque. This is the interior, and the interior looks absolutely gorgeous. It almost looks like a cockpit. This is what you have for back space storage. That would be, I guess, your trunk. Nice big dome light up here. Check seats out. Top of the roof is part of the door. See, shut it. Of the roof is part of the door. So we'll open up the door and just check out that door panel. Look at how awesome that looks. So you got a nice beautiful armrest here. This is your door lock. This is how you get out. That's really weird to me, but that's kind of cool. That's how you get out. This is your handle so you can pull the door closed. This operates the vent window. It's very nice. And this one operates your big window. I just love the door panels, how they go all the way up to the roof here. This part doesn't feel the same as the door panel itself. The door panel itself feels like leather. This part feels like fiberglass. So we're going to start with the glove box. The lighting in here isn't the greatest. You got some, let's talk about the ambient light situation. You got a light down here in the footwell, and you got a light over here in this footwell. But the dome light isn't up here where it probably should be, so you can see all this stuff. But it's back way back here, which almost doesn't really make sense because there isn't really a back seat in the back. So why put the light all the way back there? Can't really see anything up here. To the glove box, check that out. Look at how big that is. That's almost like one of those airline fold down trays. Like you could probably look, this almost looks like a cup holder indentation right there. But yeah, that's really cool. That's probably the biggest glove box I ever saw in any car, really. It's a huge glove box. You got a nice big speaker right here. Your defrosters are up there, but just check out how this double humps there. It kind of goes back to, like, it almost looks like a 1958 style Corvette dashboard. Coming here to the middle, you got your clock right here. This is your fan and temperature, and that pulls out. Right here you got for defrost, you pull it out for defrost. Right here is for the radio, so that's you can tune it there. This one switches your station. The radio is vertical instead of horizontal. Usually they're in horizontal, but this one's vertical, so that's pretty cool. Notice it says FM there. If you push this up, it totally switches. It switched the numbers and everything, and then it says AM down here. So that's cool. And then coming down here, you have an ashtray. Here's your stick shift. You pull up on this to go to reverse. There's your shift pattern right there. This is your emergency brake in the center where it should be. And just take a look at these seats. Look at how nice they are. You got your seat belts right here. I apologize for the light, but I have to shine the light, otherwise you can't see it. So the very first gauge right there is the fuel gauge. Below it you have batteries. Over here you have lights. You pull that out for the lights. Down below that you have like a window switch. That is for the headlights to flip up or flip down. So I learned today that you can actually run this car without having the headlights on. I thought once you put the headlights on, they popped up. If you wanted to run it like this, you could, but it looks more aerodynamic with the lights down. I think it looks more special with the lights down. You got a hood release on the inside. You got your wipers. Okay, so up here you have your speedometer. It goes all the way up to 160, which is crazy. Over here you have your tachometer. Right below that is a lighter. Pull that out real quick. So there's your lighter. You have your oil temp. You have your oil pressure gauge. You have your water temperature gauge, and then you have your key. So that's what the key looks like. I don't know if that's an original key. Like I say in every video. Got that key for the ignition, and it's not a reversible key. And you have this one for the doors, because there is no trunk. And then it just goes in this slot, like that. 4 ways, they're right here. Just a little, it's probably like that. So you just push it. To use the 4 ways, you just push the 4 ways in. And when they're on, these are your turn signal indicators. But notice they don't have an arrow for right or left. It's just if it was, say like you put the right turn signal on, the right one blinks, but it doesn't show you that it's a right arrow. It's just a right light that blinks. So up here you have your rear view mirror. You got your sun visors. Sun visor there. No vanity mirrors. That's what your panel looks like with the door shut. And that's what you got for space. That's your trunk space. So starting it, pretty basic starting procedure. You just push the gas pedal down one time to give it a little bit of juice, and then just crank her over. Alright, on to my final thoughts. This 1967 Corvette is an absolute time capsule, survivor car. You call it whatever you will, but it definitely has the presence. It's a numbers matching original 1967 car. So as you're looking at it here in the picture is exactly how it was 54 years ago, which is absolutely incredible. And then to think that Peter Brock sat in the same seat that I sat in, he signed the inside of the glove box. It's just, it takes it to a whole nother level. There's a couple more cool things that I want to add before we end this video. The cool thing about the Corvettes is you can know everything about the car. You can know where it came from, who built it, what colors were available, how many of each color car remain. Some other cars are really dodgy with the facts. Total production number between 1963 and 67 C2s was 117,966, and they made way more convertibles than they made coupes because the convertible was a couple $100 cheaper than the coupe, which is a rare occurrence because most of the time the convertible costs way more than the coupe. Production numbers for 1967 were 22,940, of which 14,436 were convertibles, 8,504 were coupes. But yeah, so that's what I thought of it, and it was an awesome car to review. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe this video. If you're into everything automotive, that's what I do on this channel. We do the weird, quirky, and unusual, plus legendary cars like this one. So, until next time, toodaloo!